Hi, this is Kate, one of the hosts of Everything Cookbooks. Today's episode is one of a 6-part series during which we are re-releasing some of our favorite past conversations on the topic of voice. In this episode, Kristin and I delve into what voice means for David Lebovitz, who has spent his career and life in San Francisco and France. We go into how he went from pastry chef to food writer and how all these years of blogging strengthened his writing voice. David has a new edition of his fantastic book, Ready for Dessert, coming out this fall, and we figured this is the great time to revisit one of our favorite conversations. Enjoy this episode, and we'll be back in the fall with a whole new lineup of host chats and guest interviews. Thank you for listening. Writing is hard work, but some writers have a knack for making it look easy, keeping readers engaged for years by sharing daily adventures. Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. I'm Kate Leahy, and I'm here with Kristin Donnelly. Hey, Kristin.
Hey, Kate.
Today we have a great interview. David Lebovitz not only worked at Chez Panisse for more than a decade, but also, comes from that whole school of like seasonal, local. But not only did he cook in California, he also is probably best known for writing about his life in Paris, I think.
Yeah, I love his books.
Yeah, I know, because they do take you to a place, but in a very everyday, you can kind of feel like you're walking the streets in Paris. You learn how to pick out the best baguette, really useful information, but that somehow makes it interesting. It's not easy to make, shopping for a baguette interesting if you're not a good writer.
Yeah, saying hello in a store.
Right. You go to Paris, please say hello when you enter the store. Don't just walk in like we do in America. Just say hello when you enter the door. So I will introduce him a little bit more and then we will bring him on. So sure. I don't even know if he needs an introduction, but just in case, David Lebovitz has been a professional cook and baker for most of his life. And he, I mentioned Chez Panisse. He also worked before Chez Panisse at Zuni Cafe. And then he was one of the first food bloggers that I ever remember reading. He started blogging about food in 1999, and then he picked up and moved to Paris in 2004, and he's created this whole life there. And in between this restaurant work and moving to Paris, he has written something like 9 books, and some of them are more about memoir, and some of them are more cookbooks. And we're going to talk about all that coming up.
I can't wait to hear, because he's such a prolific writer, more about his writing process.
Yeah, me too. So with no further ado, let's bring him on. Hi, David. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Kate. It's great to chat with you and Kristin as well.
Yeah, we can't wait to get into all the things that you're doing in Paris, writing in Paris, podcasting in Paris. But first, I know a lot of our listeners know a bit about your story, but I thought we'd just go back a little bit. Food was always something that you were really interested in, but when did you link food with writing?
Well, I was working at Chez Panisse. I had worked in the pastry department there for 13 years, and I was getting older. And this is 20-something years ago. And I didn't quite know what to do, but Lindsay Shear, who was the executive pastry chef and owner of Chez Panisse, had written a dessert cookbook about maybe 10 years before. And we had so many desserts that we had done since she had published that book. I proposed to Alice Waters. I said, I'd love to write the next Chez Panisse dessert book. And she looked at me and said, you should write your own book. I said, okay, not to gossip, but I was always a little different than Chez Panisse. I love chocolate. Alice's idea, and this is not an insult, it's actually a compliment. Her idea of a great dessert is a peach, where mine's like a dish of chocolate ice cream with some cake and cherries and so forth. Right. So it was good advice,
When she said that, were you like, oh, yes, or did you feel miffed?
No, not at all.
Oh, good.
I was kind of burnt out. I was probably, it was time for me to go anyways. I give people advice now. People always ask me, what should I do? What should I do? And now I preface it, I say, I'm only going to give you advice if you take it. Because it's actually a lot of work to give people advice, and I like doing it, and it's fun, and it helps people. On the other hand, when people don't take it, when I had my blog, people would say, how can I do this? And I would tell them. Or a better example is there was a woman, Elise Bauer, who had this blog called Simply Recipes. super awesome woman, one of my favorite people in the world, not just in the food world. She had this amazing blog. She had huge amounts of traffic. Her blog was amazing, and she'd give people advice, and they were like, well, I don't know. I'm like, Mario Andretti just, he's giving you a driving lesson, like, take it,
Right.
I would see people not take her advice, and kind of made me sad because it was very generous of her. And she was like, fine.
What's the advice people wouldn't take sometimes?
I have to say, I talked to some people. I did a couple of like food blog camps, and I said, I probably shouldn't say this, but I said, well, try not to use the words like fair, F-A-R-E, or family or friendly, those kind of words in the title or subtitle of your blog, because they don't really mean anything. Because when I started cooking, everyone was like, stop saying seasonal, because everyone says seasonal. It doesn't mean anything. When I started food writing, rather, it was 4 years ago, and people are still using it, and I don't mind the words. But a woman said to me, she goes, well, that's actually all those words are in my title of my blog. And I was like, oh, sorry. But she was actually a very interesting person. I said, well, you actually deserve to be noticed. And I want people to see you, not this sort of these keywords that everybody else is using. So she ended up changing the name of her website. So.
Wow. I'm curious to know like how much you liked writing, because I think for me, I really liked cooking, and the writing part was just sort of like a means to an end. But now I'm sort of swapped, and I think I'm more interested in the writing process than I was before. But it took me a while to get to that. I'm wondering, like for you, did you wanted to share recipes, and so you had to learn how to write, or did you always have a passion for writing and it just kind of found its way through food?
I actually I was like, I got a D in English in high school and so forth, and I'm probably the only person in my English class that's been in the New York Times bestseller list twice. Not to brag, but I actually didn't know how to write. I didn't know anything about writing, and I was really fortunate because there was a fellow who passed away a few months ago. His name was Fritz Streif, and he worked at Chez Panisse. He wrote the Chez Panisse cookbooks, and he helped me. He taught me how to write a cookbook.
Wow.
And the other side of that is he was really difficult. And he would query me things like, when you say butter a cake pan, do you mean the inside or the outside? And like my head, we'd spend 2 days like debating this, and I was going nuts. But it taught me, you're both in publishing too. You fight for certain things. People know that. But on the other hand, sometimes you need to listen to the editor who says, people don't know to stem the cherries before you pit them.
Right.
So we always have to balance that thing. So I didn't know that I was a writer. I didn't consider myself a writer. And then I wrote my first memoir, because cookbook writing is writing. And he helped me with my first 2 books. So they were me, but he was there with me writing. And then I was on my own with every other book, The Great Book of Chocolate, The Perfect Scoop. And then I wrote a memoir, which is a story. And, I had been blogging for a couple of years, and I had, probably 3 or 4 readers a day. But I learned how to just through osmosis, like how to build a story. Yeah. The great thing about blogging was there were no barriers. There still aren't. Anybody can write, for better or worse. And I could just write. And a lot of stuff I wrote was bad, and that's okay. You're both in the cooking world. The first time you make the chocolate cake with strawberry glaze and, candied walnuts, something's wrong, and you got to remake the walnuts, and you got to do the cherries again. And that's, we make the mistakes so people don't have to. With writing, you just write, you write, and then you edit. I also learned like editing is 90%. Everybody hates being edited, especially copy edits, but it makes you better. My first editor said, the editor's job is to make you look good. And I never will forget that. That was Susan Friedland. Mm. And all those annoying questions, and that helped me be a better writer. And also blogging, because you have to defend your position all the time. You can't just write like, I like oranges, but mangoes are my second favorite. Then everyone's like, well, you obviously have never been to India. You don't know anything about mangoes. You're just like, okay.
Oh, right. Because with you blogging for so long, you had very active comments.
Yeah. And people also forget I was a line cook, and they would sort of say things to intimidate me. I'm like, I just got to tell you, like, I've been called every name in the book. I've called people every name in the book. Like, I don't really care. Like, I don't care if you like mangoes or oranges better. This is my blog. And I like orange. Actually, I like mangoes better than oranges.
Well, ooh, this is a hot take.
You're going to get all these comments on the podcast. What does he have against Florida?
The orange
Texas,
people are really,
California?
I mean, the oranges, they're going to be up in arms for sure.
Yeah. But it is interesting being considered as a writer. Like when I wrote my first memoir, I was like, oh, and it was kind of expanding on ideas on the blog, but there are a lot of other things like exposing yourself, talking about your personal life. I don't have a lot of barriers because once again, I was a restaurant cook. So it doesn't bother me to talk about, we're all kind of 12-year-olds, sense of humor. And, I worked always with women. So I'm, very intimate with a lot of women in a way other men aren't. But so.
Well, let me ask you, writing a memoir, I mean, even being used to blogging and just like the habit and the skill that you pick up after all those, like, what is it, like the 10,000 hours you need to become like proficient in any kind of skill? I think that's like a Malcolm Gladwell thing. But I mean, you already wrapped up. Yeah, you wrapped up those 10,000 hours pretty quickly. But then like with the memoir, though, I mean, I would be really intimidated to figure out how to structure like the narrative, what stories to tell, how to keep it interesting. And also like you're going to be talking about real life. Like how do you talk about the real people in your life with keeping them in your life?
I always wanted that.
Tell us a little bit about like how you learned memoir. Like what are all the things to unpack there?
Well, one of the things I learned, and it sounds terrible when I tell people this, I was like, if you want to write a memoir, the biggest question you have to ask yourself is who cares? Like, who cares about your story? And I've read a couple of memoirs and I'm like, well, their people's stories not that interesting. Then I read the one by Erin French, who has the restaurant in Freedom, Maine.
The Lost Kitchen.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God, this is quite a story. And she tells, these horrible things that happened to her, and some of them were self-inflicted, drug abuse and so forth and alcohol. But I was like, wow, this is really a story. I'm very open, like right off the bat, I will talk about things like trying to flush meringue down the toilet and it's staying in the toilet for 3 days because it doesn't want to go down. But people remember that stuff. And I think honesty is always the best policy. You don't want to be mean. Like I live in France. I've lived in France for 21 years, but I was young when I wrote The Sweet Life in Paris. And, my intention is never to insult French culture, but I was at a different place where I was like, oh my God, the woman at the the bakery yelled at me because I didn't order properly or something like that. And those are all sort of novice, newbie problems. But we sort of also compare, some of us here who live here is like a lot of these people used to talk about like stepping in dog poo, and that kind of gets cliche. So I wanted to break away from the cliches. And, it's like, I live here, I live in a, little 1-room apartment that is a mess. And I also wrote about the good and bad things that happened to me. Some of them, were self-inflicted. Some of them were just, I was in a different culture that wasn't mine. That was a very interesting book to write. I had a very difficult time with the editor on it. On the plus side, they were actually a really good editor in terms of cutting things out. They said to me, you need to bring in Roman earlier. And Roman is my partner. We're a gay couple. And I was like, just wanted to be, I didn't really feel like I wanted to expose him just in general, but he was a character in my life. And when I did bring him in more, it actually was more interesting because he's a really interesting character and he's French. And anything I believe it, when people say that's anti-French, I'm like, well, actually that's because Roman told me, not me. So that was helpful. That book had recipes in it.
And how was it for him?
He has no idea because he doesn't speak English. But what was funny was I found the manuscript on my computer. And now with like Microsoft, you can just translate into French. And he read the chapter about our cleaning woman. And he had tears coming down his face, like laughing. He's like, you captured this so well. He's like, how'd you do that?
Yeah. You are so funny. I was wondering if humor for you it just comes naturally, or is it like intentionally added, or?
I think I'm just really observant. And one of the, we're all in the cooking world. And I think we're just extra sensitive people. We're sensitive to smells, tastes, things we hear, experiences. And we're also inspired by, like, you might be writing a book on raisins and, you go to some bar and there's a cocktail with dried raisins in a bottle. And it's, going out and just being part of the world inspires what we do. And, people used to tell me, like, how do you come up with these stories? I'm like, everything is a story. Just like me literally turning on my TV here in Paris. It's so complicated to get, like, it's like, and then, there's a story about how I bought the TV, how buying things in France is different than America and so forth.
Yes.
My head sometimes explodes with stories.
I was just thinking with on your Substack, and we'll talk about your Substack later, but you're making this like mocha master coffee. It's like a cliffhanger, and I can't wait to see like what happens. And I'm just like, how is he making a coffee maker seem like this? Like it's like this, there's drama and there's intrigue. I mean, so that's like there's a craft there.
Well, that story, it's funny because I was staying, I traveled to California, and of course in San Francisco, everybody, if something's expensive and there's a waiting list for it, they want it. So I'd arrive and I'd be jet lagged and getting up at 2 a.m, trying to figure out how to use this Mocha Master. Everybody has this Mocha Master. I was like, I got to write a story about this. And I actually did tell my cousin's wife, I said, this is not an insult about very nice of you to let me stay here. I did say, I'm writing a story about your coffee maker. Is it okay? And I was kind of like, it was so crazy, this coffee machine. And it has actually a great ending. It's a wonderful ending, actually. I'm getting chills. It was just, this machine is like it was like, oh, it's the best coffee ever. I'm like, it's got 4 different buttons, 3 different knobs, 7 different parts, like it's a friggin' cup of coffee. So I wrote about it. And then the company actually, and this is also a thing that makes you a better writer. I didn't want to insult the machine. It's like, I didn't want to insult an inanimate object, but it's a company. There's people behind the company. My goal is not to like rail. It's like, nobody really wants to hear you rag on something. It's like bad restaurant reviews. People work hard. Anyway, the company actually reached out to me and they were like, we want to send you a machine. The woman was really nice. We want to send you a machine so you can learn how to use it. And it became really convoluted. They said, okay, we're going to send you to the French people. And and of course the French people were like, non, c'est pas possible. We don't know, they were sending me an order form. And, I'm not an influencer that's like out there to get freebies. But that became another story. It tells you about the difference in France. In America, it would have arrived by FedEx the next morning. They would have had somebody come over and make coffee with me. France, they're like, oh, no. So now the woman and I are really we're really good friends.
That's so funny. I have a book coming out this fall, and the photographer happens to live in Paris, and we were trying to send him a copy.
Who is it?
It's Valentin Hennecken, and he's more on the fashion photography side, but he did this Italian wine book with me and Shelley Lindgren, and we've been trying to send him a copy in Paris, and it's FedEx, like volleying back and forth. He wasn't there. It's like, when I read your work, I completely, I get it. It's just like, this is the truth. This is what happens.
I was Succession, the TV show on HBO, just finished, and people were talking, people were like, well, I don't really care about a show about rich people, but the 2 of the most interesting people on the show were the outsiders who had either married into the family or were like, and they were kind of us. Because we're like the dopes around all these like super rich, privileged people.
Stuffing our mouths.
Yeah. We're like,
stuffing our mouths at the
free
party.
Food.
Right. Have you ever thought of what would have happened if you had stayed in San Francisco or California and what that would have done to your writing? Like, was Paris like a really important thing? Do you think you would have written memoirs if you hadn't moved to Paris? Or
I just have to say, you have really good questions.
Thank
I'm like, wow, I'm going to give you my podcast. I do think about that because I had a life there. One of the reasons I left San Francisco was because I didn't really have anything to do. And there's a few other reasons, but I don't know. I do think about that because I'd like, well, I'd certainly have a lot less paperwork. I also think about if the situation were reversing, like I had met this French guy in America and he had to go through what I go through here. Like I would have said, I didn't sign up for this. Like, it was really nice meeting you, Pierre. Au revoir. And he's like with me every step of the way. I'm like, I was like, I can't break up with you. You're like awesome. So,
yeah. Well, and that really is apparent in Le Part, and I'm probably pronouncing it incredibly incorrectly.
Never title a book people can't pronounce. That's rule number one.
But I mean, I'm reading this book, and he's such an important part of the story. Yeah. But it's also kind of a devastating book. Like, you really put yourself out there. But it's also, I mean, it has this great ending. But I wanted to know, like, you're writing that book, or you're living that story. You're also writing a cookbook. Can you tell us a little bit about that whole situation? Because I'm just thinking, like, how are you testing recipes and writing them? And then you're also like living through this like hellish remodel.
Yeah, this construction zone.
And anyone who hasn't read it should definitely pick up a copy.
When I die, my gravestone's going to say, like, he did it in spite of it all. I was writing My Paris Kitchen, and we decided to buy an apartment and have it renovated. And I said, when can I move in? You know, it was a gut renovation and so forth. And I was working on a book, and I was like, well, I'll work in the book till my old apartment, till it's done, till I can move, and I'll move all my stuff. I had no idea I was ever going to write a book about renovating my apartment. In fact, my friend Heather said to me when I bought it, she goes, whatever you do, don't be an American who writes a book about renovating in France. So I dedicated the book to her. I'm like, sorry. So anyhow, the book, I was, doing recipes, and I work, you don't need to, like my friend Flo Breaker, who was a baker, and she had this huge dream kitchen, which is great. But I wrote books in a little tiny kitchen that was Paris sized, and it really teaches you how people bake. I didn't have a KitchenAid mixer at the time and so forth. So I was doing things by hand. But then I lost the book in the renovation. I wasn't really online, or I was before, that era where you sort of backed things up. You had Dropbox or whatever. But I also lost The Sweet Life in Paris when I started writing it. I used Norton Disc Doctor, who is not a sponsor of your podcast, so I can give him a shout out. And it deleted my hard drive. I started the book all over again. And as people in the food writing world, sometimes you freak out about losing stuff. And that happened to me with blog posting, all this. But then you sort of rewrite it again, and it's better.
Wow.
You're both looking at me like,
no,
really?
I'm like horrified, but I also, I'm just horrified by the idea. But I can see how it would be better, because maybe you've processed an extra level or something. But
even if you lose your work through, glitches and just remodels and whatnot, how do you keep track of stories? So when you're writing this memoir about renovating an apartment, that's a long period of time, because you tell these stories very clearly. You feel like you're actually in the rubble of this apartment that's going through this hellish remodel. How did you do it?
Writing Le Part was the hardest book I ever wrote, because I was recalling something that was pretty bad that happened to me. But I was walking down the street. I was in New York City or somewhere, and all of a sudden it struck me. This is like 7 years after it happened, or 5 years or whatever. I was like, oh, okay, I can tell that story and make it funny. And I don't know why. But I worked really hard on that book, getting the tone, because I didn't want it to be a downer, even though people said, oh my God, I was freaking out for you. I couldn't breathe and so forth. And the book has been optioned for a TV series. And one of the people working on it had mental problems working on it, I should say. So his story had a pretty powerful effect on people. The book is about me, and it's about my stupidity and my not being ready to take on that kind of project. It's not about France. I wanted to make sure it wasn't about France. And even a couple of times on like my book tour, a couple people said, well, obviously you don't like France. And this Frenchwoman wrote me this really long message. And I was like, excuse me, but everyone in France has a bad experience renovating. It's a very common thing. It's common everywhere, but in France, it's a common thing. My situation. But I didn't want to make the book a bummer. And also, it's sort of, before we went on the air, you sent me a few things we're going to talk about. One of them was about recipes and including recipes in the book. And I didn't really want to include recipes, because I was like, it doesn't really go with the story. But then I realized it lightens the story. I hope it lightens the story.
Because each recipe has a head note, has a little story. So it's almost like an interlude in between these chapters.
Yeah. And the first chapter of the book, I talk about having to have a medical test to get my bank loan.
That was such a good opening chapter.
And I would imagine, once again, a lot of people probably open the book at the bookstore, look at it, go, oh, I'm not reading this book. But it happened. It was the truth. I wasn't going to hide it. But I always think also you should start with something that's like a little startling. It's like, oh,
Totally.
Oh,
yeah.
But then once again, my mind as a writer works like it was about me having to have a test where they needed a sample of my urine. So I found a way to link that to a recipe. They call it pissenlit, is the French word for dandelion greens, because they make you piss in the bed. Pissenlit. And then, once again, that tells you a lot about France. They're not opposed to bodily functions. It's funny to, like salami is called rosette because the end of it looks like a pig butt, which is they call it as a rosette. I'm like, you teeth end, you take the end, I'll take the middle piece. So that's how my mind kind of works, fortunately.
But you wrote that, you said 5 years after the experience?
I think
or
it
roughly?
was, it might have been 3. It takes a year and a half to write a book.
Yeah.
To be honest, I had to write a lot of that book outside. I had to leave France to write it. I wanted to be somewhere where I could think about it and reflect on what happened to me. Yeah, I was in New York and I got up at like 6 a.m. and I'd work till 6:38 p.m. Then I'd call my friend Brad Parsons. I would text him and go, I need cocktails now.
I like that kind of like self-imposed writer's retreat. I would sign up for that, write from 6 a.m., 6 p.m. and then have really good cocktail afterwards.
Well, everybody has their own way of writing. Some people like to do it with other people. People go on retreats. They have a coach. I thought about hiring a memoir coach once, but I didn't.
How is the book pitched? Because you can't go to, say, 10 Speed Press and say, I want to publish another book with you. I mean, maybe you could, but I don't think they do memoir. So how did that happen?
We need to do part 2. For this, about how I got the book published. But basically, I signed a 2-book deal. It was after My Paris Kitchen came out, which was a 10-speed press, and the book did well. And I love them. They're close personal friends of mine. I'm part of the family, and they do a really good job. They don't do memoirs, but they are part of Penguin Random House, Crown, all these other subsidiaries. So I signed a 2-book deal to write a book about French drinks and to write Le Part. And I decided I should write Le Part first because the drinks would come after. So and also as a writer who has, I've written 9 books, or you want to sort of follow up, create a rhythm. I'd written an ice cream book, and then that, I morphed into, My Paris Kitchen. That was another book. And they were all sort of the tonality. It was kind of the course of followed my life too. So they were happy with both books, but they sort of handed off Le Part to somebody at Crown or Broadway. Crown. I get them all confused. Like I mentioned, I had a very difficult experience with The Sweet Life in Paris, and they made sure that I didn't have a difficult experience. And I had a really interesting editor on Le Part. She actually suggested that I end the story about 3/4 of the way through the book. And I was like, well, I think I need to finish it this way. And she's like, oh, it's stronger this way.
So that was a battle you had to...
It wasn't a battle. We just, it was a discussion. Her and I didn't fight. The Sweet Life in Paris was very difficult. I didn't like the cover and so forth. And they said, we don't care.
Wow.
So I cried.
Yeah. Oh,
I know. My little book.
How did writing Le Part affect how you wrote Drinking French? Did it affect your writing, do you think, or
I needed
not?
to drink a lot. No, well, what happened, I write about France and different aspects of French culture. I'm not a stay-in-your-lane writer per se. Like I wrote about ice cream, but then I wrote savory food and My Paris Kitchen and desserts because I'm a complete person. I am not just a sweet machine. So... There was something very interesting to say about French culture and Le Part and about my life. But there was also a part of my life that I live in France. I live in this place where drinks are really important and no one ever talks about them. There are books about wine, there are books about cognac, there are books about whatever. But there wasn't really a book that talked about the world of French drinks. Like, what does a cafe mean to French people? Like, when we had the pandemic lockdown, all people wanted to do was go to a cafe and drink with their friends, and not alcohol necessarily, but coffee. And it said how important, on TV, everyone was like, I miss my friends. I must go to a cafe. And French friends, when I told them what I was writing about, they're like, why? And I would tell them, and they're like, oh, okay, oui, je comprends très bien. Because there's a drink for everything. You have coffee in the morning. People have pastis in the summer in Provence. They have cognac in the region. Then there's Pinot de Charente, which is part of the cognac region. It's an aperitif. And there's all these things that a lot of people don't know about. And I always say, you write a book because you have something to say. And I also think in the age of the internet, we're looking more and more at single subject books. I like books that have a focus. And no one needs another recipe for chocolate, flourless chocolate, individual ones. They're out there and we all love the cake. But that recipe you can find online. I think books tell a story nowadays. And like you did that, Kate, with La Buvette. You told the story of this wine bar in Paris, and you did it really well.
Oh, well, I thought it was so great that Drinking French has that little tribute to La Buvette. You have a picture of you and Camille standing there, and I think it was the burrata that she dusts with the mandarin peel dust. So it's like this little collection of stories, and I think having it come out in 2020 was probably this perfect sort of getaway for people. I mean, the book comes out in 2020, and if you had known, it would be like, I don't want my book to come out during a pandemic, but it comes out during a pandemic. And I'm sure it sold really well because that's what people wanted, right? This little vacation that they take through a book.
Well, my book tour began the day after we locked down in France. They shut the borders. And everybody was mad at me in America because they were like, you said you were coming and we have people coming. I'm like, the border's closed.
Global.
Like
Wow.
I cannot, I can't helicopter out of here. Sorry. And then of course America followed suit. But it was interesting because when the book came out, it came out right at the start of the pandemic. So I didn't have a book tour. Book tours, I don't think sell a lot of books, but they give you a chance to talk about your book, which is, I always tell people who write books, like even if like no one buys your book, it gives you a chance to talk about it on Instagram. But somebody at Instagram had reached out to me maybe it was a little before the pandemic. And she was like, have you ever thought about doing videos? It's like, absolutely not. Like, I'm horrible on screen. I'm terrible at videos. I'm an idiot. And she goes, well, I can help you. And she goes, everyone at the office loves you. I was like, everyone at Instagram loves me. Like, she's like, yeah, everyone watches you and they think you're fun or follows you and you're fun. I'm like, okay, can I get more readers? Can I get higher up in the algorithm? So I said, okay, well, maybe I'll try this Instagram Live. And I had 300 bottles of liquor because I had just finished writing this book. You have to buy a bottle of liquor just to make one drink. It's like, nope, amaretto doesn't work. Let's try eau de noyau. So I was like, okay, let's make a drink from my book. And then I started doing it every day because I had nothing to do. I loved the lockdown. I'm like, this is the best time. I'm living my best life. I'm staying home. So I did a daily happy hour, unfortunately it was like 6 p.m. here. It was like 9 a.m. in America. And it turned into something where a lot of people started tuning in. But then I had to do the recipe. People wanted the recipes for this. I had to do a blog post about it. I had to announce it on Instagram. Today's drink is this. And people were like, what, can you give us the recipe in advance so we can make it with you? And it was a lot. It was like my whole life. But I didn't have anything else to do. So not complain. I cleaned out my freezer. It was the best. But it was really good. A lot of people bought the book. The book ran out. They ran out of books and they had to have them reprinted. People were having trouble getting the liquor because I'd talk about like chartreuse or Dordogne vermouth or, Dubonnet or something. And they're like, where do I get it? But that was when mail order was starting to be like a big thing.
Right.
And I'm not tooting my own horn, but a lot of people came up they still come to me like, we didn't make any of the drinks, but just seeing you every day made the whole thing like tolerable.
Oh,
I'm like,
wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah, it was really nice. And I tell people when you write a book or you write a recipe, you're giving people something. When you want to be a writer, writers give. Advice I used to give to bloggers was you're giving, you're not getting. Don't think about getting, give writing, give people something interesting to read, give them a recipe, give them a tip about going to Paris. Be useful to people. Don't waste their time, and especially bakers, we're giving people now, I don't know any bad well, there's probably a few, but bakers are generally really nice people. Like if you work in a restaurant, like everyone's nice to the pastry department because
that's where the good stuff
is. Right?
Yeah, they want their birthday cake on their birthday. So be nice to us.
I wanted to ask just now, you're doing a lot with Substack. The state of blogs we know has changed a lot, but how did you get to Substack and what do you like about it?
I started my blog in 1990 and it grew from like 0 people, and I really literally for 8 years, nobody read it. People always say now, like, how do I do a blog? How do I write a newsletter? Have people read it? I'm like, do it for 8 years and then someone will read it. But sorry, but it's true. It's very, it's like writing books. When I wrote my first book, my agent said, you know what? The book sales were good. He's like, this is going to take 10 years. I was like, what? I don't have 10 years. But it does take a while. There's very few overnight successes. But I'd been blogging for a long time and the world of blogs had changed. And I condensed this to it used to be a lot of fun people. Well, it used to be a few fun people, literally 5 people. And we all linked to each other and we're sharing things. And then we found out, there's a guy in Vietnam writing about noodles. And it's like, what? Noodles? I love. And then we included him and so forth. And it rolled into something. And then it became something that was, people were discovering how to do it to
make money.
Yeah, I was like, thank you for saying that.
Monetize. You're like,
yeah, I don't have anything against making money and people should make money. People need to make money. But I didn't get the feeling a lot of times people were doing it because they love food. Like, I love food. Like, my partner's always like, all you and your friends talk about is food. I'm like, get out. I'm breaking up with you. It's just my life. My life is all about food, eating, and I just love it. And I love sharing it. So I started to see a lot of things change. People were writing for Alexa, writing for, these blogs were like, this family-friendly recipe will please your family. And then, and also I was getting a lot of comments because it was public, my blog. Everyone, there's the same comments over, can I reduce the sugar? Can I freeze this? And a woman just wrote to me, which is funny. She goes, I used to work for this famous French chef. She goes, he said, the only thing that belongs in the freezer is ice cream. just tell people that. So I was getting the same questions. How do I make this gluten-free? And I don't have a problem with the questions, but I started writing differently. I started writing to answer the questions. Like, if you don't like this, this, and this, then substitute this. And it was funny when I wrote Drinking French, people were like, I don't have rum or I don't like rum. Can I use gin? And I was like, absolutely. That's actually how cocktails get invented. Like, someone swapped, they're all, there's like 3 cocktails and they're all different variations on that. So Substack reached out to me. We had a nice chat. I was also getting really overwhelmed by the technology of having a blog. Like, people don't realize how much you have to learn, like how to use WordPress. And then I had tech nightmares for years on my blog. Like, the servers would go down and I'd be talking to people in Kansas at like 4 a.m. about Apache AP3 things. And I had no idea I was like, just once my site went down for like 4 months and I almost had a nervous breakdown. It was just horrible, all this tech stuff. And I was like, you know what? I didn't get into food writing to code. I didn't get into food writing to do that. So Substack, I had my newsletter since 2014, I think. It was never intended to make money. It was just a newsletter. I used to tell people, listen to me, do a newsletter. No one can take that away from you. So I moved my newsletter to Substack, and all of a sudden, all my tech issues disappeared. I didn't have to worry about servers. And is a new WordPress upgrade going to ruin my plugin? And I need to upload a plugin. I have to send the thing to my tech people in New Zealand. And I'm like hyperventilating about it now. And I can feel
I'm getting nervous about it.
Yeah. I lasted like 3 years on WordPress, and
the plugins will kill you. It's like, if I upgrade this, is the whole thing going to crash? Or, it's terrifying.
It just kept getting hacked, even despite all the upgrades. So
I'm also an early adopter. Maybe it's because I'm from the Bay Area, but I was like, you know what? I want to try something new. Like, when I started blogging, everyone said it was really stupid. Like, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't give away stuff. And I'm like, well, it felt right to me. And it felt right to move to Substack. They told me a lot of things, and I was like, really? And it actually, everything they said was right. They've been very good. I find them really supportive. I am one of the larger writers on their food writing platform, but I feel like they care about me because, they make money when we make money. And I also liked that it's not public. And by that, I mean, people can share it. They can pass your newsletter around. I put links to it, but you don't get just people dropping by and saying like, what do you mean you don't like oranges? Like mango, or you need to go to Florida or, whatever. So I could write again without sort of worrying about offending people. Like I try not to, I had trouble saying the word urine here, which is very, anybody who has kids, the word is very common. Yeah. But anyway, moving along. It was nice to have this forum that was it got me back to where blogging used to be, where it was like, you know what? I want it to be casual. I want it to be fun. I didn't want people screaming at me about typos. I like it. And it's working for me. I am still getting into that whole thing. I don't want to have any typos, but like I stopped using like a fancy camera. I don't have to use Lightroom, Adobe anymore, because when I got my new computer, they're like, it doesn't work your version. You have to now get this new version and you have to pay for it. And it's, I don't mind paying for things, but it was like, I just want to make food and talk about it. So now I use my phone. Yeah, I use my phone, and I like the format. I kind of like being independent again, less scripted. I have a paid version. When the part came out, people were kind of really going nuts on me because they wanted pictures. And I didn't realize I was going to be writing a book about it. Some people were like really demanding. They're like, we demand pictures now. And I was like, and I was like, well, all those things you see online, people get KitchenAid or somebody sponsors their kitchen remodel and they come in with photographers. They do. It's all planned. I didn't have that. And I also wasn't super comfortable with putting pictures of my bathroom on the internet or my bedroom, my kitchen, even my kitchen. I was like, but with Substack, I was like, well, I can have these paid people. I can do something special for them because there's no advertising on Substack like there is with a blog. So you can make money that way. And that seemed to be a really good compromise for me. And I was like, so I put my remodel on Substack, but it was behind this kind of paywall. Everyone listening now is turning off. Everyone hates the word paywall, but I still have a free newsletter and it's fine. I just had special stuff available, for people who I felt more intimate with, because I have there's people comment, and there's a community, and it's really nice to communicate with people.
They're fans,
right?
They're fans, but they support me, and that can sound kind of icky, but I just feel like they're the ones that I just feel closer to, not just because they're supporting me, but it just felt right. I guess I should say it's like people who buy your book.
Is that what's exclusively behind the paywall? Is the renovation, or
you'll have to pay to find out?
No, I do. What's so funny, David? I was going to say I do pay, but I feel like once you pay, you lose track of what's paid and what's paid and what's not.
I put things like more personal stories.
I'm more trying to get at is why do you think? I know why I pay, but why do you think people pay?
Well, why do you pay?
I mean, I love your writing, and most of the Substacks I pay for tends to be because I really love the writer and I want to support them. But I don't know if that's a common.
Yeah, I don't quite know. But I just feel like it's more intimate, that smaller group of people. And it's not out there. And, when I started, I said, this is for people. And, someone said, well, they left a comment. They go, well, it's really naive of you to think that people aren't going to share this stuff. Because I put pictures of my apartment on. And I said, I tend to believe that most people are just really good, because everyone in my life is really good. And I surround myself with people that are really good. And I've always worked for people that are really good and with people that were really good. So I don't assume the worst, even though I live in France. And I'm French. The American side of me assumes the best.
Well, and that's actually one thing about keeping things a little bit private in a way. Does that affect recipe writing too? Because I think one of the you were saying with blogs, and I've heard this from other recipe writers, it's you can't please all the people, but there's so many demands. You can't make, David, I think you did this write-up about La Bouvette, and you had the whole terrine from Camille, and people were asking, if I don't have pork fat, can I use butternut squash? And it was kind of well, no. It was just weird. And I'm thinking that's, so if you have recipes, does it change the way you can just write the recipe how you want to, and you don't have to have all these substitutions and all those kinds of...
what's super crazy? When I started my blog in 1999, it was because my first book, Room for Dessert, came out. And I said to people, well, I want to have a place where people have a question about the recipe or problem they can reach out to me. Because that was always something, when you had a book in the old days, there was no way to get in touch with the author. But like Marianne Cunningham, her number was listed. She's like, somebody called me the other night, and and someone actually called me once at 10:38 at night. And she said, I made the ginger snaps in your book and they took 8 minutes instead of 7. And I'm like, okay, can I finish brushing my teeth now? But it's, it is good. People say this recipe doesn't work. And then you say, well, because did you add the salt when it said to add? Oh, I didn't use salt because my wife said to use white pepper instead of salt. It's like, well, but it is nice to have feedback with people. But I was getting a lot of questions. And I think sometimes people ask questions just because it's possible to ask questions. It's like sometimes on Instagram, I'm like, I was just at, La Bouvette and I just had this amazing glass of wine. I tag La Bouvette and I link to it. And people are like, where'd you have that amazing glass of wine? La Bouvette. They're like, oh, thanks. Yeah. But I think people, they're busy either in their car, or the kids are screaming or whatever. And they need that glass of wine. They want to
that's true.
You talked about this cadence with your books before, like pacing it out. And I was wondering with your Substack, if you do that, if there's intentionality, or are you just like, today I'm going to post about this?
Yeah. One of the reasons I stopped writing my blog was because I started writing, it was a lot of recipes. And everyone's like, what? We love recipes. And it was stifling my life because I was trying to come up with new recipes all the time. And then I started doing recipes from people's books. And my blog was starting to turn into like other people's book, like recipes. And I kind of like to feature other people. Like I featured Camille's book, The Terrine, because I liked the book. I didn't do it because I needed a terrine recipe for my blog. So the cadence, I kind of like to, even when I had my blog, I would write like a story about, the value of change in France. It's the only place in the world where like the change is like, it's worth more than the actual value of the coins because people are craving change. They're always, they need change. When you go to the store, they never have change. When you go to the market, no one has change. Yeah. It's like you're a cash business. You don't have change. It's like you don't have, something's like 94 cents and you give them €1. They're like, do you have 4 cents? What? Just keep it. And they're like, no. They're going to all the other vendors and trying to get your 6 cents back. You're just like, okay. But it tells you a lot about French culture. And I was writing about those things. And sometimes people are like, who cares? Where's the recipe? I want a recipe and whatever. It's like, well, I'm more than just a recipe machine. So that's what I like about the newsletter. People can opt in. They don't have to get, we used to have a joke in the food blogging world, like, is your browser stuck on my website? Like people are like complaining to people about their blogs. So people opt in to get it. They choose to get it. If they don't want to get it, they can not get it. And it's fine. I don't check who gets it, who doesn't get it. It's not why I write.
Well, do you have another book in the works, or are you putting it all in Substack and your podcast that you have going? What do you think?
Well, I have 2 ideas. The problem is in France, the whole French system is designed for you to retire. So I'm like, wait, what's the point of living here? Because somebody wrote recently, like, France must be, you must love being in France because you get a whole month off in August. I'm like, well, if you work for yourself, you don't. If you work for a company, you do. You get 10 weeks off, whatever. So I'm like, well, maybe I should retire because all my friends travel. They're like, we went to China. It was amazing. And we're going to Indonesia next week. And then we're going to go to Egypt and we're going to go to the beach for the summer. And I'm like, I have to stay home and write my cookbook. I've got copy edit. And I remember once I went to Sicily and I got my copy edits and I spent the whole time in a room.
Oh,
and you're both back and feel you're both making faces, but that's the moment. And they're like, we need this back by Monday.
I know. Yeah. They never give you enough time.
Yeah. I was like,
copy edited.
Well, now when I do a book, I'm like, send me the schedule now.
Actually, that was Kate's big tip way back.
Get the schedule so then you can push back early on.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't send it to you, though.
That's true.
Or they'll be like, I'll send it later. I'll send it later. Oh, here it is.
Well, I've been really fortunate. I have really good editors. They've always sent them. But I'm also on time usually, so it's not a problem. But I have 2 ideas. Like, well, one is that if this TV idea when the TV idea, when the rights were getting purchased, my book agent said, she lives in LA. She goes, just to let you know, it's not like a book. Like TV takes forever. And I'm learning that. Like I will probably be dead and there'll be like David in Paris, the sequel to Emily in Paris, you know.
I would watch that.
Yeah.
I can't wear those kind of clothes, but so I sort of thought, well, maybe I should write about another memoir. Then I thought, I really would like to write a book about chartreuse, the liquor, and not about the liquor, like chapter 1, how it's made, chapter 2, why you drink it, chapter 3, recipes. Because the chartreuse is 1,000 years old, and it tells the story of France because the year 1002 or something, these monks met. They wanted to get away from the modern world. And it tells you like the French government tried to get the recipe from them when they were nationalizing all the businesses and they kicked them out during the French Revolution. And the neighbors hated them. And it tells you something about French jealousy and they burned them down. And taxes, they weren't paying enough taxes on using the wood to fire up the distillery. And then there's like the world, the number one bar for chartreuse is in Baltimore. The Idle Hour. It's like, yeah. So there's all these stories about this kind of strange liqueur that's having a renaissance.
Yeah, that's
But
really
I
cool.
kind of wonder if anybody would buy it because it's such a niche thing.
If it was written in a way that had that memoir quality of exploration and that you're going to these places to learn, and then you also throw it back and tie it into a larger French history picture, I could see it.
Yeah.
I could see it working. I think it would be pretty, you'd have to have that narrative, right? That nonfiction sort of narrative flow, whether that's a memoir style or, it would depend on the writing, I think.
The other thing is like, I've lived in France a long time, I'm French now, and there's less to sort of make fun of in a way or to find amusing. Mm-hmm. I think I found humor because I was so green. And now like in daily life, daily life is different for me now. Like I had this run-in with this woman on my bicycle the other day and she would not move. She was going the wrong way in this narrow bike lane and I just stopped. And she goes, well, I'm going over there. And I'm like, and that affects me how? But she was like insistent that she was right because she was going there. So I was like furious all day. And then the next 2 days, I had like 2 amazing encounters with like salespeople who I knew, like the vegetable produce place I go to. He goes, every time you come in here, it's great. I love seeing you. I was like, really? Me? Yeah.
Wow. That's cool.
Sweet.
But it's not really enough for a story. The bicycle story is a story.
And so is the Mocha Master story, which we will stay tuned for.
This episode is sponsored by Mocha Master.
But and I've done that before. I have flooded a kitchen with a Mocha Master because it wasn't lined up the right way. And anyway, that's a different story.
Well, I have another story. I really want to write about the machine. It's great because that's, in the stage of influencers, it's like, well, it's not because I got the machine for free. It's because there's a great story about it.
David, this has been an absolute pleasure talking with you about all the things that you do and how generous you are with just your experiences and how we can all kind of learn. But rule number 1, put in the time and write and don't, and eventually you'll find your audience.
Yeah. And you've written really great things on your blog, Kate, about how to write a cookbook. And a lot of that information is so valuable. Like I was reading it, I was like, this is really good information. And I know that, Kristin, you do cookbook consulting and coaching. People think, how do I write a book? How do I write a book? I'm like, there's so much good information out there, but you do have to put in the work. It's a lot of work to write a cookbook.
I think the work is worth it. That's what I always say. I love the work. So
finding a way to make it work.
Find a way to do it. Yeah.
Cookbooks are like antique stores. They kind of thrive when they're together on a shelf. Cookbooks complement each other. I have Flo Breaker's book. I have your book, Nick Malgeri's books. I have Claire Saffitz's book. I have, these books that enrich my life. I leaf through them. I look at them. They help me gel to what I like, what I aspire to.
That's wonderful. Well, thanks again. And we'll have to have you on again.
Thanks. It was great to chat with both of you.
Thank you for listening to Everything Cookbooks. For more episodes and ways to contact us, go to our website, everythingcookbooks.com. You can find more episodes on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your audio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a review. It really helps. Any book mentioned on the show can be found on our affiliate page at bookshop.org. Thanks, as always, to our editor, Abby Serquitella. Until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.